Hi, everyone. Welcome to this virtual village of women gathered here from all over the world to share their stories of birth and motherhood as a way to empower each other through storytelling. I'm Bibi Lorenzetti, and I'm here with Kumi Sawyers. And I might be saying the last name with the wrong accent. I always do this. She is a yoga teacher and a massage therapist based in California. And Kumi, I'm going to let you introduce yourself best. Please tell us where you're from and how you happen to be in California.
Okay, hi guys. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Bibi.
Yeah, I'm so grateful.
My name is Kumi Sawyers, and I am a yoga teacher and massage therapist, and basically all things wellness. I live in California, in Los Angeles, by way of New York City, which I was there for about 18 years, and relocated to LA 3 years ago. But I'm currently on Orcas Island. My husband and I have a house here, and so we've kind of been spending more time here since we had the baby, because it feels way more nourishing for all of us to be in nature during these early years. It feels really important to be in nature.
Yeah, absolutely. They thrive so much when they're out in the leaves and water. And
yes, especially.
So how did you have a son, right?
Yeah.
And he's currently how many months?
He just turned a year, August 30th. So he's 13 months. Yeah. We just had our year anniversary.
Happy 1 year anniversary of mothering.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the journey.
And was he a baby that you brought in, or was he a surprise baby?
So he was a surprise, as much as a surprise can be. You know, I think
right.
I just turned 40, and so when I got pregnant, I was 38, and I was, in a place in my life where I was really open to have kids. I'd had, waiting that long. I feel like I went through all the things that I wanted to go through and had all the experiences that I wanted to experience, and I was ready for the next chapter in my life. And I met my husband, and he also was like in his early 40s, and we were only together for 7 months, and
wow,
pregnant. So so a lot of
that's amazing.
Learning about each other was through becoming parents together. So
wow.
Yeah, it's funny because Silas is a year old, and we've been together I think like 2.5 years or something. Yeah.
That's a wonderful. I love that how you phrased it, of like, we learned to be together through parenting. That's such a refreshing, I feel like it's such a refreshing way to look at it. It's like whenever you have so much time together, and then all of a sudden your parents, maybe even though they always say it's, you should wait before you have babies, I feel like what a wonderful way to really get to know each other right away.
Yeah, you really get thrown in. It's like, welcome to this. There's no smoke and mirrors here. This is real. Yeah, which was nice. And I think because we were older and we were ready for that. We were ready. So yeah. So
how was, go ahead.
He wasn't necessarily planned. We were just open.
Okay. And so when it happened, how did you find out?
So I actually was in Colombia, the country, leading a yoga retreat with my best friend, Cien Fujikawa, who had just had a baby a few months before. And so she was there on this retreat. It was her first time leaving the baby, and she was, pumping the whole time. And I was supposed to get my period on the trip. I came with like my cup, and I had like all my like things for getting my period, and it just didn't come. And it kept being like, wait, as I'm like lying in bed next to her while she's pumping and like seeing the reality of what my life might become, it's like we keep counting the days. I'm like, wait, now I'm like 5 days late, and now I'm 6 days late. And then by the end of the trip, I was 12 days late on my period. And, so I kind of had this moment of like realizing I'm pregnant without taking a test, and kind of holding on to this time and in space where I knew my life was going to change forever as soon as I got on that airplane and landed. and had to tell
I just got the chills listening to you.
Yeah, I had to tell my boyfriend of, 7 months that, I'm pregnant, and that was January of 2019, right? And then 2 months later, lockdown happened with COVID. So
okay, right.
yeah. And it was also like my boyfriend, he was my boyfriend, Brian, now my husband, we didn't live together, it was a lot of change, and it was, so for me, it was like, this is a huge shift happening. Moving in with this man, we're getting married, like all these things. Cause I didn't have good insurance. And so we got married really quickly. We moved in really quickly, compounded also by COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
That's
was like
a lot.
change at once. Yeah. There was a lot of change at once. Yeah. But it was, interesting because I think that, that part of it wasn't weird for me just because I come from a big family. There's six kids.
Okay.
And none of them have been married before they had babies. And most of my siblings, it was the same story. They were together for like 6 months to 9 months.
That's so interesting. And then they got married and had a baby.
Yeah. Most of the weddings in my family, the babies are like 2 years old. Nobody gets married before they have kids.
That's a good plan.
Yeah. Yeah. So that wasn't too crazy as for us. For me, that was okay. That was more normal. The COVID stuff was interesting because being, choosing to wait until I was older to have a kid, a lot of that came from this feeling of like wanting to feel very grounded and secure in my career, and really grounded and secure in, just where I was in my life. And, the one thing I think that pregnancy and motherhood teaches you is you can't make any plans. And as soon as you make and so I think that COVID just kind of compounded that, which was, my work as I knew it was completely transformed. Like financial stability went in the first months of COVID was like, everybody thought like we're all going to be living on the streets. Like nobody knew what was happening, with a lot of hysteria. So it was really this kind of moment of like feeling this reality of you have no control over anything, and you just have to kind of surrender, which I think is a big mantra for when you're becoming a parent, especially a mother going into labor, like preparing for labor.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how was it for you? I gave birth right at the height of COVID. So I feel like at least I was pregnant in society for, 8 months or 7 months. How was it for you to be pregnant? I don't know how social you were through the whole pandemic, but how was it to keep that to yourself and to not be able to share it with others and with the world physically?
Hear me?
Yeah, it's going in and out, but I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, that's good. Just want to make sure. So being pregnant, was that the question?
Yeah, being pregnant and during a pandemic. So when people you weren't able to physically, I assume, share your like be seen, right, as a pregnant person.
That was really interesting because I went from like January. So the time in which I was able to start telling people I was pregnant, 3 months. Well, obviously I told my closest friends and my family, but like all my yoga students and my clients, and like, I kept it, I wasn't telling people until we had, gotten to the 3 months. And that time hit as soon as lockdown came. So it was this really interesting thing where I was pregnant and I was still teaching and still working. And then lockdown happened and it was time for me to announce it. And, most people, so basically like all my students and, clients saw me as a non-person. And the next time they're seeing me, it was just pretty radical in that way of how much can happen in a seemingly short period of time, and how we can grow these children. Like, I think before you become a parent, before you become a mom, the idea of 9 months actually, or 10 months feels like a really long time. but it goes by so quickly.
So
Next thing you know, you've built a human being inside of your body. It's like, I did this, I built this. It's like the most sci-fi crazy shit. It's incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you described that. It totally is.
Yeah.
So you didn't struggle with not being able to share physically with others, like with your family, or even if we cut out, it'll still catch you. So don't worry about it.
I shared with everybody. I didn't still record.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just keep talking. I mean, I think that there was just so much, you know, when you're early pregnancy, there's so many hormones going on. There's so many feelings. There's so much. I think actually, interestingly enough, so I worked through, you know, seeing clients and teaching, and like really kept my full-time work schedule the first few months of my pregnancy, because I've always been a worker, and it's always been something that like I love to do, and it gives me purpose, and so I didn't like slow down with my work at all when I was the first trimester, to the point though where I think that like it probably wasn't great. And I think that I was, in my brain, I was like, I want to work really hard right now. So like when I have the baby, like it just felt like that's what I wanted to do. But I remember like coming to the end of the day, and it's like 5:00 hits and you're exhausted and you just really need to rest. But I would still have like 3 more clients, or like I just couldn't be on my feet as long as I thought I could. But I was like kind of pushing the limits with it. And then when COVID happened, I was forced to slow down, which I don't, I would have done that. And being a massage therapist and being a yoga teacher, as you know, it's very physical. And so there was something kind of nice about having, which I think most people felt around the world, even if they're pregnant or not, but having permission to just be pregnant.
To stop. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that was line, which allowed me to just focus completely on this project with my business partner at the time. And so I was just, it gave me the time to not have to work with clients, which was my full-time thing. And I could take this project that was like, my side thing, and put all my energy. So we were able to launch that in the beginning of COVID, which was really great.
Yeah.
But that ended up blowing up in my face, which will come down, after. That's more my postpartum story, but.
Okay. And so
anyway, so there were gifts in it for me. Honestly.
Yeah, go ahead. No, finish your sentence.
Well, I guess what I wanted to say was that it seemingly was a shitty situation, but I did find gifts thing, and give my body a break from the physical, labor of what it means to be a manual therapist and a yoga teacher.
Yeah, I was going to say the massage therapist with being pregnant must be quite challenging, the physicality of it. Yeah. So that's kind of a blessing in disguise. Yeah. And so what was your vision of yourself in labor, and like, what were you in these months preparing yourself for?
So I always knew I wanted to have a home birth. My mom had 6 kids and we were all born at home. So for me, that was the normal. Like that was normal. Going into a hospital was not normal.
That's so great.
Our midwives, it had to, it was, so we had that. And then we also had a doctor set up at the hospital. So my sister also lives in Los Angeles, and she had 2 kids at home. So we just, because it was COVID and we couldn't just go and interview a ton of people, and it was the very beginning of COVID, so it was like really even more like nobody was touching or talking. I just hired Shelly and Shani, who were my sister's midwives, and I hired my sister's doctor, who works with midwives, because a lot of doctors in LA, they don't work with you if you're doing a home birth. But I wanted to make sure yeah, I wanted to make sure I had backup just because, you know, I've heard so many birth stories. And even if you are planning to have a home birth, I think it's really also have a relationship with the hospital just in case you need to go. So
Yeah,
you have
that's really
somebody
smart.
there who's like,
Yeah.
you have a relationship with and you trust. So
Yeah.
I did both. So I simultaneously was working with a midwife and going to the doctor throughout my pregnancy, just so I was prepared in that way.
So that must have been two
But, you know,
really different realities to live in. Like when you had appointments, the two experiences aligned next to each other.
oh, totally. Yes. But I, you know, I recommend every who is planning a home birth, I recommend that you also have a relationship with the doctor. Any woman who's planning a hospital birth, I recommend you also have a relationship with the doula or a midwife, because you need those two worlds to be integrated.
Yeah.
You know, you do, you know, the hospital is lacking in maternal care and in a healing environment, which is really important for a successful birth, I think. And then I think also, you know, if you have an emergency, you need to be able to go to the hospital. So
yeah, and it's good to have someone that you already know and trust. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
you had all of that set up.
I had all of that set up. Yeah. And that's really like all I had set up. So as I said before, I was launching this clothing line, and I was working 24/7. I was working my ass off doing this and so I really didn't prepare for my labor. And my husband also was working. He's a screenwriter and he had like major deadlines. So the two of us were just like busy the whole time we were, you know, I luckily didn't have a hard pregnancy. I didn't have morning sickness. All I had was just like the normal, like, you know, tired. I was just tired at night, but I had a lot of energy still. And so I was really busy my whole pregnancy, and I had planned to take the last month off to prepare for my birth. And, you know, take the birthing classes and set up the nursery and, you know, have the baby shower and do everything. And I went into labor almost a month early. So we were completely unprepared for the birth. Yeah. So we really were just thrown into it, because I kept being like, you know, some people would be like, oh, you know, you should really be prepared to, you know, give like at least 2 months in advance, because you can go into labor, you know, at 36 weeks, like you want to make sure that like, and I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen to me. And it's not going to happen to me. And I finally gave myself a hard finish with work. And because I was still teaching classes, I was still launching the business. It was all these things. And I was resistant to even having a baby shower because I was like COVID, and I just was working too hard basically. And finally I was like, all right, I'm going to have my baby shower on this date, which was August 30th or August 29th. And that's going to be my last yoga class. And I'm also had hired somebody for my clothing company to help like manage everything so I could walk away and take a month off to prepare. We are a home supply kit, which you need to have set. And I had just ordered it like 2 days before, and it had luckily gotten there in 2 days. Like because I would have gone into labor and not had any of the equipment at the house, because wives were like, have you ordered anything yet? So baby shower, I taught, you know, an online yoga class to like 50 people. I, you know, was like still working whatever I got. And then I had to go to the beach for my baby shower. And I show up at my baby shower, and I remember it was this beautiful gathering of my girlfriends. We did a beautiful me letting go and preparing, dropping into my, you know, the time in which I'm allowing myself to prepare to bring Silas into the earth, or in, you know, into
Yeah.
land.
Yeah.
And I get home, driving home from the beach by myself. Everything feels normal. I'm feeling great. I get home and I'm telling my husband about the day, and I take a shower, and then I sit down on the couch and my water breaks. And I was
So
like,
you had no contractions before. It just went straight into, okay.
yeah, no contractions at all. And I'm in the best mood. I'm so like, this is happening finally. Tomorrow morning, we're going to wake up and like, and I was wearing a bathrobe because I just had a shower and I didn't have any underwear on, and I felt like a warm water come out, and I was like, oh, this is the ocean from swimming? Like, did that just come out? And I was like, Brian, because he was in the other room, I'm like, I think a lot of water just came out. And he's like, what do you mean a lot of water? I was like, well, I think it's probably just the ocean, because I felt no pain, nothing. And then more came. And then I was like, that's a lot of water from the ocean.
That's not the ocean.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh my God. I'm like, okay, so what do I do if this is really my water breaking? And Brian, I'm a woman and I've been around plenty of women, and my sister and my brother's wives who've had babies. He's had no exposure to any of this. He hasn't taken a birthing class. We were supposed to do that week. So he like fully is like, oh my God, like full panic. But anyway, to make a long story short, we figure out that I'm in labor, but it took a little bit to figure it out. My midwives were like, taste the water. They're like, I can't tell you whether it's ocean water or your water breaking. So why don't you tell me what it tastes like? And I was like, okay. So I taste it and I was like, oh, it's salty. I'm like, oh, good. It's just the ocean water. It's salty. Oh, it's not, false alarm. And they're like, no, actually amniotic fluid is very salty.
I was going to say.
Yeah. So they basically were like, I think you're in labor. So go ahead and finish your dinner. Call your mom and your sister, who had just been at the beach with me all day long. My mom was like 75. They had been in the hot sun all day with my baby shower. Everyone's tired, like ready just to go to bed. And I call them, it's like 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, I think my water broke. We're not at all prepared. I need you to come over and help me. So my mom and my sister show up at 10 o'clock at night. I finish eating dinner and they're like, you need to go to sleep. You and Brian need to go back into your bedroom.
So you still had no contractions?
48 hours. Still had no contractions yet at this point.
Okay.
So my mom and my sister come over and they open up the birthing kit and they get everything ready, the soaking of the pads in comfrey and like the sterilizing of all the towels and the setting up of everything, which took hours. It was like they got there and they were done by like 1 o'clock in the morning. My sister has 2 kids. She goes home. At that point, Brian and I were in the bedroom trying to get some sleep because we knew if this was happening and we needed to have our energy. And at that point, my sister leaves, my contractions start. So my mom stays and I leave Brian in the bedroom so he can sleep. And I come out into the living room and I'm laboring and my mom is there with me. And she's incredible. She's delivered 6 babies at home, and she's
a pro.
She's a pro. And then my midwives don't show up until like 11:30 the next morning, because that's when I'm like that's when the contractions were a minute apart.
Really, yeah. 5 minutes apart.
Yeah, 4. Yeah, that's what it was. I'm like, I don't even remember at this point. It was. Yeah, so they show up at 11:30 and I'm fully dilated by 12. It's 30 minutes later. But then it turned into 5.5 hours of me actively pushing.
Oh.
And like active labor. Yeah, fully dilated, actively pushing. And my baby and I unfortunately had to be rushed to the hospital at like almost 6 o'clock in the evening, and I ended up having an emergency C-section at the hospital.
Wow. So I lost you when you said your
Yeah.
baby was, what was happening to your baby?
So Silas, what turned out was my birth canal is really small. And
Okay.
Silas, even though I was fully dilated,
He
there was no
couldn't
way
fit
he
in the
was going
birth
to fit
canal.
through my birth canal.
Got it.
So he was lodged up against a bone, and I was pushing
And he
really,
couldn't
really
go
hard.
down.
It was like, I didn't know how strong I was. Like, I was 5.5 hours. And as you know, it's like you're basically doing a sit up.
Oh my God. Yeah.
For
5.5
5.5
hours. I can't believe you did that for that long. That's a long
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
And then
So how was it for you to accept going to the hospital? Were you by that time like ready to be taken over? I think I lost you, but we will get you back.
So you were rushed to the hospital. So how was that for you to make that shift? I mean, I'm sure you were so tired by then that you were willing to. Yeah.
At that point, I had nothing left. Like, I was completely, it was interesting, laboring at home it was a really beautiful experience. Like, I really dropped into the flow of it. And I think I look back at that now, and I realized that like my years of yoga training really prepared me for birth. And just life in general, of really understanding like that there's an ebb and flow to everything. And with the contractions, like knowing that they were only going to last for like 90 seconds and then it was going to go away again, like for me to be able to really breathe through that and find a way, and just moving my body and breathing and having the space to walk around my house and to go in the shower and to just like allow to kind of like to be in the rhythm of the birth was felt very primal. It felt something I was very prepared for. Like the pain of it did not, like if he would have been able to fit through my birth canal, I would have been like, that was an incredible experience, because I could handle the pain. Like all of it was doable. Like it was not scary for me at all. He just
it sounds like your body was kind of meant for it. You just kind of went straight through and dilated and
already it was like I was in it. I was like it was really something that I felt good about. All of it felt good. And so I gave it my all. I pushed so hard. And by the time that they told me, they were like, Kumi, like they could see he was crowned, and they could see that he had a huge bruise, a hematoma on his head from me pushing him so hard against my pelvis. And at that time it had been 5.5 hours. No, sorry, I'd been in labor for almost 16 hours. And so it was getting to the point where they, as midwives, had to legally call it, but also they saw that there's no way he's coming out. We tried every position, everything, and they're incredible midwives that have been doing this for 30 years. And so I just knew when they said, we got to go, that we had to go. Like there was nothing in me that was like, no, we're not doing this. Like I think a lot of people get really attached to their birth story. And I, as I said, was prepared for either. And so I just knew it was time.
Yeah.
So then it was like getting into a car when you're in active labor is insane.
Well, not only in active labor, you're like fully dilated.
Yes. And like getting in the car, and luckily the hospital that we had chosen was only a 15-minute drive from the house. But when I knew that I was going to be going to the hospital, and I knew that I wasn't going to be pushing anymore at this point. And you don't want to push when you're in the car anyway. I had no energy to push. My eyes were swollen shut. My face was swollen.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah. But having a contraction without pushing is like the only equivalent I can be is like when you have to take like a huge poo and you like can't poo. It's like having the feeling to push a baby out when your body, and then me having to resist that push was really intense.
Yeah.
Being in the car, having the contractions hitting and then once the contraction hits, it actually feels relieving to push, but I couldn't push. So I had to hold on. And then you have to go into the hospital and it's like a whole thing. Like the midwives aren't allowed in there because it's COVID. All the paperwork extra because of COVID, having to get COVID tests with swabs up your nose. So I went from having this incredible experience at home with my mom and my sister and my husband and my midwives to being thrown into this completely other world that, you know.
And when you were trying to resist pushing, which that's not a small detail.
Not a small detail. And it took them from the time I arrived to the time I actually ended up in the operating room was almost 3 hours. So I had to resist pushing for that long. It was crazy. Almost 3 hours.
Wow.
And they were having me be like, okay, so Kumi, you know, like talking to me as if I had just come on with like a bruised knee. I'm in active fucking labor. I'm in that experience. I've been in that experience for 15, 16 hours at this point. And they're like, what's your address? Okay. So asking me all these intake questions, like my husband's not even in there with me. And it was just like, and I'm like, give me a second. And I'm having active labor and like, they don't even somehow register that. And I'm like in the intake room, like going through this experience. It was crazy. And then all of a sudden they're ready for me. And I go into the operating room without my husband because it's COVID, he's not allowed. And within 3 minutes, my baby's out of my body. But it was crazy because I'm strapped to a table. I have this like blue, this blue piece of paper over me. And at this point, they had to anesthetize me because I'm getting a surgery. So all the pain in my body's gone. I'm completely disconnected from everything. And then I just hear my baby's voice for the first time. And I don't see him because there's a piece of paper over me. So I hear him crying. And I just start sobbing. It was the most crazy feeling ever to like have this child be lifted out of my body, being completely disassociated from my body with no sensation, nothing, to hear my baby's cry for the first time and knowing that somebody else is holding him. And so they come over, they bring him over, but because of COVID, I don't really know why, but like I was not allowed to hold him first. And so they went and did skin contact with Brian, my husband.
Oh, okay. Thank God, at least that.
But it was still this like crazy thing. It was the most surreal thing ever, having a C-section. I know a lot of women do this, but it was really surreal for me.
The baby usually comes, if everything goes well in the cesarean, they allow you to put it on you. So I don't understand.
Know why for me, I don't remember the details of why, but they took him to Brian to do skin to skin. And then I came out later, not that much longer, but it was crazy. It was a crazy experience.
That's a big trauma.
It was like fully traumatic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I think that all labor is traumatic, it's beautiful, but it's traumatic on the body.
Yeah.
And, but I definitely think that the cesarean and my experience in the hospital, I'm very grateful for the hospital because if I hadn't have had the cesarean, I think both me and my baby probably not. If this was earlier times, one of us would have died, if not both of us.
Right.
So I'm very grateful for that. But with that being said, like the hospital experience was like horrendous, like just the care and the food, and there's nothing about being in the hospital that is healing.
Yeah.
At all. We had to be there for 4 days.
Oh, 4 days. Okay. Were you allowed to both be there during that time?
Luckily, yes.
Okay. Thank God. Okay.
Yeah.
And so did you feel like, I know the baby wasn't on you right away, but did you feel like then you got the bonding soon after that?
Yes. Then they were very good about bringing him to me right away. And then we got taken to our room. But this is then why I'm really grateful that we also had my midwives the whole time. Were like, even though they couldn't come in with us because of COVID, they were still there to really advocate for me. And I think the really scary thing, especially if you're going in for a birth and you haven't taken the time to really educate yourself on like the things that they're going to ask you in terms of like the shots and the vaccines and like things that like we don't know about until we learn about them. And when you're a mom and you just go into this hospital system and they just tell you you have to do these things and you don't know the side effects, you don't know the benefits, weighing the risks, you know, it's
and you're also not
stuff.
in the headspace to be thinking about that unless you've prepared yourself.
Unless you're prepared. So, and we weren't prepared because we went in a month early. So, but I was really grateful for the wisdom of my family and then also the wisdom of my midwives to just kind of, they basically said, which was the advice they gave me. And I, you know, I'm only sharing this because it's something that helped me, but I know a lot of people feel different, but they were just like, say no to everything. Just say no to everything. But the pressure that they put on me, like, scaring me was major. And
that's unfortunate.
So yeah. And so he ended up having like a high bilirubin count, which is, you know, jaundice, which most babies are born with it. And his count wasn't even that high that I come to realize later.
Okay.
But because of that, they were like really scaring me to the point where my midwives were like, here's what you can do. You can ask them, you can just leave and take your baby and go put him in the sun. But you're a new mom and they're scaring the shit out of you. So, you know, you can ask them to bring the bilirubin blanket into the room with you, but they wouldn't do that. And so they basically took my son away from me and put him in another room under bilirubin lights for almost 2 days.
What?
I had just had a C-section. I had to get up and go breastfeed him in a nursery that was on a different floor. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So it was really stressful being in the hospital. And come to realize they were like, well, you know, everything in the hospital is about liability. And if you do not know, you know, what like a high bilirubin count was, like he wasn't even that high. I think it's like, it becomes dangerous when it's like above like 15 or something. And he was like at 11, but because it was close enough, they still felt like, if, you know, liability purposes, they're going to take your baby away from you. So,
and also you're in such a vulnerable state yourself that what are you going to do with that situation? You've never had a child, you know, it's like,
you just don't know. And even if you think like, you're just like, I'm so used to standing up with my family. We've always been counterculture. We've always like been the people who did what no one else was doing. And I'm used to that. But when you are exhausted from labor, you're exhausted from C-section, you're terrified that anything is ever going to happen to this precious thing that just came out of your body, that it's very easy to fall into fear.
Yeah. And also it's the first time you make a decision for another being that can't advocate for himself. So it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
So yeah, so that ended up happening for us. So it was the hospital time was traumatic.
Yeah. And
it really felt traumatic. And then, but then getting home was like walking into Eden. It was the difference between the hospital and being home. And it was,
How do you feel you went from this traumatic experience to home? How did you, like, I guess we never leave behind that kind of history, but how did you like arrive and make peace with all of that?
Well, I feel like I'm still arriving and making peace, because I think the one thing that like you don't get when after, you know, it's like I tell all my friends now who are like preparing for a baby, I'm like, I know it sounds like a cliche, but you really have to, before the baby comes, like just soak up any time, like this free time that you have to just like have a bath, you know, just to like lie on your back and look at the ceiling, going on a walk, doing a yoga class, like all these things, like, this is luxury. This is like self-care, like especially you understand, like we teach people self-care. So we get like, that's what we do for a living. And like self-care is like, that's what we get to do all the time. But when you become a mom, you realize how much of a luxury that is. And yeah, so I feel like once the baby comes, you just hit the ground running and you don't really have time to process anything. That's how I feel. Like I don't have the time to process. It's still, all of it is still living inside of me. Like I haven't had a solid night's sleep since before he was born, because being pregnant, I was uncomfortable.
Right. You don't get that either when you're pregnant.
Yeah. So like, I'm still sleep deprived. I still am like lucky if I get to have, you know, an hour, a couple days a week where I get to just, you know, be in my body. And, you know, it's a very different thing. So I think that I'm still grounding, and I definitely feel like he's over a year now. I definitely feel like it's getting easier and I'm finding my way and I'm coming back to myself, but it is a journey and you are transformed. Like we really are transformed through motherhood and through
birth also.
Yeah. Through birth.
And I feel like in situations like yours, like where you describe, there's this enormous amount of like extra willpower and bravery that you need to exert to move through all of that. I mean, there were so many, your whole birth journey is just surprise after surprise after surprise. And it's like in a moment where you're so vulnerable, you had to like not only be this tigress that's birthing, but also be this tigress that's like protecting herself from all these things coming at her. So it's a lot on many different layers of being, like physically, emotionally, energetically, like the whole thing. So
I'm still landing. And then, you know, then unfortunately, like the day that I got home from the hospital, the next day, you know, I had launched this company, and then that I was telling you about, working so hard, and it was like a huge success, and it was like my dream coming to reality. And it was like really what was like, had chosen to like do, you know, not to stop my teaching or anything, but this was like a new element of my creativity and my vision that I had been planning on doing for years, and finally did it. And I had the time and the energy to do it because I wasn't a mother yet. And then I came home from the hospital and I'm on the phone with my business partner, and she completely just turns on me and basically tells me that like she doesn't, basically has forced me into dissolving the company. Basically was like, I don't want to do this with you anymore. Like, because whatever reasons, but obviously a lot of it had to do with fear around me being a mother, and her feelings the workload was then going to fall on her. And it turned into what should have been my fourth trimester, my maternity leave. That was a complete, pulled the rug out from underneath me, wouldn't talk to me without lawyers. I was stuck in legal battle for 6 months. I didn't have a maternity leave because I was turned on by my business partner, and I was so afraid that like she was going to take everything from me that I had to work and manage, you know, the sales and manage the customers and manage everything, and all the while trying to fundraise to buy her out, all the while dealing with lawyers as she's basically like verbally and emotionally abusing me while I'm postpartum, and then forces me to dissolve this company that was like my heart and soul, really. Like it was so devastating. So all that happened all at once. So really it's been a crazy year, but there's a gift in everything. And I think that like, I think the one thing that I think about in terms of that, when I look back, because at the time I was like, I don't know what this gift is. Like having one of my best friends like turn on me in this way, the most vulnerable time in my life. Like you never get back that fourth trimester. It is the most crucial time for the baby. It's when the baby and you bond. It's so crucial. And the mother needs to be supported during that time. Like if I could give any mother's advice, that 4th trimester, you need to have your support group. You need to be nourished and cared for and fed. And so for me to have to go through that was really hardcore. And it coming from one of my best friends was wild.
Yeah.
So, so it's been a journey for me for sure.
Were you able to breastfeed through all this, or did your milk?
I breastfed.
Your milk affect? Okay, so your production wasn't affected by all these stresses.
Luckily not, but you know the reason why, I think it was because I had an incredible support system.
Okay.
I have really amazing friends, and they all showed up majorly for me. Like, my sister set up like a meal train, and everybody signed up for the first week, which I recommend everybody doing. Everyone signed up for the first month. So every day, basically, of the first month of Silas's life, friends came and brought delicious, home cooked meals, and it was a time for, I got to see every day somebody new came in. Even though it was COVID, I didn't care because they were like my best friends, and they showed up. They brought me food. They brought me flowers. it was this beautiful time where, although I was feeling like this deep, so much trauma was happening, but at the same time, there was so much love that was just pouring in, and it really shows you that duality. And love always wins. And it was incredible in that way. Like, I've never felt more loved, more taken care of, and I just also had to deal with other shitty things, but that's life,
right.
And I had the support to do that. So
as you were speaking about her, I was like, how is she so together, having had that experience? But now that I know that you had the support system, it's just so, I've seen it in my own experience where I didn't have any traumatic events, but we were very isolated because of COVID and living up here. And I feel like you're saying, like, love always wins, and like togetherness always wins. And that's so great that you were able to match, that challenge with feeling nourished and supported and loved. That's so great. It's truly the power of coming together is really so amazing.
Oh my gosh, it like cracked my heart open so much. Just the amount of love and the way people showed up for me it goes to show, like, I think we have these moments in our life in your life where it's like we nurture the relationships in our lives, and when it's time, like, how well you've nurtured your relationships for when it's time for your tribe to show up, and it's like they do, and so it feels like, to just to feel that, and to the love and the relationships, and that was so heartwarming. And so it made me realize that, like, whatever happened with my business partner, like, she wasn't on the same, her and I weren't meant to be. So maybe she did give me a gift, because her actions were so horrendous that, like, I'm glad that I don't have to spend the next 5 to 10 to 20 years with her in my life anymore because of, you know what I mean? And so it just goes to show, like, we need to nurture and be around the people that uplift us and care for us. And it showed me that very clearly. Yeah.
And I almost feel like it falls into, my own experience, but also a lot of the women that have come on here to tell their story. There is, like, whether it's right after you give birth or shortly after, things begin to fall away in your life. And they're like, you begin to see things that you might not have expected, or you might not have seen, or that you might have planted like years before and you didn't know it was going to come back, or that you didn't know you were showing up in a certain way. And all of a sudden it's like, it's just gifted to you in some way or form. So that's also, I love that you bring that up, that there's so many gifts that come, with motherhood. Yeah. So that's wonderful. So I love this whole journey. So now that it's been a year and 2 months,
yeah,
how do you feel, as, like, what's your experience of yourself now compared to what the feeling you had of yourself before?
So I feel so it's interesting. I was actually just talking with my mom about this last night because my mom was in town visiting, and she lives in LA, but she was here on Orcas visiting us for the past couple of weeks, and she left today. But we were talking about that, about how like I'm in a point now where I feel I love being a mother, and I've given myself, the past year to be a full-time mom. Because everything that happened, I just was like, you know what? I just am gonna be with my son. I'm just gonna give him a year of just being a mom. And I have been working, but not like I used to. And so I've been a full-time mom, and what that takes is it's full on. Like, you never have a moment for yourself, like, ever.
Yeah.
I
know.
And so, and even when you're trying to do something else, it's just you basically can't do. It's like it demands, and it demands all of your attention, and it should. And so, but I still have, the desire in me to do my work, and I'm always thinking about ideas, and I'm always like, I'm still very much active inside of my mind and my heart about the things I'm passionate about, but I don't have all the hands and the energy to do it right now. So I have this thing of like, I have all the ideas and I have all the energy, but I don't have the time that I used to have. And so now I'm just getting to that point where I'm like, I'm ready to start getting help. And so I've been, when I get back to LA, I'm finally like been interviewing, and I'm going to have a nanny come part-time to help me so I can kind of start getting back to just myself, just working, but also just like having an hour to do yoga or go on a hike, or just like have a phone call with a friend without a baby like sucking on my breast. You know what I mean? Just like a moment.
Going to the bathroom without a baby, like knocking on the door or looking between your legs.
Oh my God. I know that's the one thing I say to people. I'm like, just appreciate like being able to actually go to the bathroom when you want to, because that's going to change very quickly. And it's different for a mom and a dad. Like, my husband and I'm very lucky. Like, he's a very, he participates and he's a great dad, but like still, like it's just different.
It's just different.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm just now at a year feeling really ready to get back. It takes a long time to get to that point, to recover in all the ways we need to recover, to give birth to this new person, because we're never going to be the same after we have a baby. And to take the pressure off. There's a lot of pressure on women, to do it all. And one thing I always say is like, we can do it all. Women are incredible at multitasking. It is a gift that we are born with. We know how to multitask. But I think just because we can do it all, it doesn't mean it's healthy for us to do it all. Right. And so, there's comes a point where I think, especially early motherhood, where like we have the oxytocin and we have all the hormones and we're like still doing it all. But it comes a point where you hit a wall after a year or so of doing it all, where you're like, I have nothing left. I'm completely depleted.
Yeah.
And I think at that point, it's like, you have to start rearranging. And so that's where I'm at now.
I love how you described that, because I had the exact same, like that year, the year arrived and it was like,
I can't do this anymore.
I need to sleep.
I need help. Yeah, I need help. And I need to because a lot of it for me is like, I know I need help. But it's one thing when your baby, especially if you've chosen to be if you've chosen to stay at home with your kid and your baby is really attached to you. Like my son still, like I breastfeed him for him to go to sleep, like he's still like he still sleeps in bed. Like he co-sleeps with me. So it's like, to have somebody else come in to help, it's like, how are they going to get him for his nap? How are they? It's just like, you know, there's all these things that you come up against. You're like, it's just easier just to do it myself. But there comes a time when you really just have to be like, he's going to cry, and that's okay. It's going to be uncomfortable for him and for whoever comes in to help for a little bit. But you have to just pull the plug and allow other people to come in.
Yeah, and allow them to experience that too, because that's part of, you know, I feel like it makes them strong as well to know how to be comfortable with other people as well, if they're people that are going to love them. Yeah, I totally hear you on that. And I feel like it's been really nice. We started getting care around August, so he was like 16 months and just 2 days a week, but it's been really beautiful to see him create a relationship with a stranger, and now he's like excited when he sees her, and it's just so nice to also just let go and like trust that another human is going to take, that you don't have to put all the rules on someone else, that they might also know a thing or two of their own to like take care of the baby. So it's
exactly.
I'm excited.
And I think
for
that
you.
like, you know, thank you. I know, I'm really excited too. I keep talking about it. I'm like, I can't wait till we get back to LA and I have my nanny. But yeah, and you know, I think that it's, you know, my mom always reminds me that like we used to, you know, we really did used to live in tribes and in villages, and mothers never did it alone. You always had the grandmothers and the great grandmothers and the other women and men in the village to help. It's only in these like this modern age where we have these nuclear families where we are so separate that like, and I think it really does take its toll on women.
Yeah.
And, you know, so
absolutely.
I think that's why I think, you know, what you're doing and like any support that we can give the community of mothers of educating, and like, you're not supposed to do it all. You need to ask for help. You have to figure that out in whatever way you can. And like some people don't have the financial means, and so then we have to call upon like our parents or our friends or whoever, I don't even know, but like we have to find it.
Yeah, and we're not alone in seeking it, so there's always a way. I feel like it doesn't matter how much you have financially, there's always a way to get help by giving help, you know, like
exactly,
we're all in it together.
Yeah, and that's something that like on the island here on Orcas, there's a mommies group that is set up with moms where it's basically the moms come with the kids, but it's known that if one mom needs, you know, decides that like today I actually need to have a couple hours by myself, like other moms hold the space. So you can come and bring your kid. It's not like a daycare, it's just a mom's group, and you can leave the kid, you know, and so, and then the next week, another mom will be able to do that. So it's kind of this like beautiful kind of built-in community of daycare, but it's really just moms helping each other.
Yeah, that's really great. That's really great.
Yeah.
So Kumi, what would you've given so much already just with your story, but what if there were like two or one more thing, because I feel like you've already given at least two, but what would be the closing statement that you would want a woman to walk away with?
Well, I think that the closing statement is to, at least in like the early year, like the first year of motherhood, is to remember to take care of yourself as much as you're taking care of your child. So a lot of that, it was like simple things for me, which was like nap when they nap, make sure that you're eating, make sure that you're drinking water. All this stuff we can forget about because we're just so much looking after this other person. So I just think to remember yourself within all of it, because, you know, in order to be good parents, or good mothers especially, we have to feel good.
Yeah.
And so that's really, I just think, you know, making sure that you remember yourself in all of this, which is really hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things, but I think that's a reminder that we as mothers need to.
Yeah, well, and also I think I just want to bring it up again because it was really nice to hear that for a home birther, to make sure that they have a relationship with a doctor, with a hospital, so that in case it needs to go a different route, there's, you know, that in place. And I love.
And then also, if you are doing a hospital birth, to also be prepared to research, like, you know, to research all the things that they're going to come to. Like, do you want to do circumcision? Do you want to, you know, do you want to get
the aftermath? Yeah.
shot? Do you want to do the vaccines? Like, learn about all this stuff, because otherwise you're just giving your child. And so education, support. Yeah. That's really, it's a journey.
Kumi, yeah, absolutely. How might one find you if they want to connect with you? And I'll write it in the YouTube comment description under the video, but just so we have it on video as well.
You can always email me at kumarawellness@gmail.com. Lemon, which KUMARAWELLNESS@gmail. My dog's barking at me. Hi.
And are you on Instagram as well for like?
Yeah, my Instagram handle is Shady Lawn, SHADYLAWN, or you can just find it under my name, Kumi Sawyers.
Okay. Kumi, thank you so much for all you've shared with us today. I'm really, really, really grateful that we finally got this down. And I can't wait for everybody to hear your story. So thank you.
Thanks, Bibi.